Today, the history of Pripyat is shrouded in the darkness of mystery and horror stories about radioactive zombies and five-headed wolves that roam the city. But before the settlement of Pripyat turned into an exclusion zone with a couple of hundred feral inhabitants, it was quite a prosperous city of the USSR. Before you watch this video, I'm going to ask you to support my channel with a thumbs up. It won't cost you anything, but it means a lot to me and my channel. Thank you. The history of Pripyat dates back to 1967. It was then that the Chernobyl nuclear power plant began to be planned, and with it a mini-town for the builders and workers of the plant. 7 sites were considered for construction of a satellite city. The area of the future Pripyat was chosen due to its convenient location. A railway station already existed nearby and there was space for road construction. In 1969, a project of a workers' settlement was issued. Pripyat became a town not at once, with drawings of the future first constructions. The city began to be built on the bank of the Pripyat River, which is a tributary of the even larger Dnieper River. It belongs to the Kiev region. It is only 94 kilometers from the capital of Ukraine, Pripyat. Not far from the city there is the territory of Belarus. Chernobyl nuclear power plant is located 2 kilometers from Pripyat. Construction of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant began at the same time, but the first construction boom was usually focused on the satellite city of the nuclear power plant, since about 6,000 builders had to be housed and fed somewhere. At many Soviet nuclear power plants, atomic cities were built months or even years before construction of the nuclear power plant itself began. Those unfamiliar with the story of the tragedy at the Chernobyl nuclear plant often ask, what is Pripyat? First and foremost, Pripyat is a town of Chernobyl workers. But it had a side role. Pripyat city became an important transport hub of Kiev region. Automobile roads began to be built around it. Nearby there was already a railway station of Yaniv. In addition, with the construction of the city, the fairway of the Pripyat River was lengthened, and there was now a navigable route of almost 600 kilometers. As a result, Pripyat city became a center of intersection of several types of roads and a transfer point between the nearest stations. Pripyat in 1986 is a well-developed city with a developed infrastructure and almost 50,000 residents. As we understand it, it was mostly nuclear workers who lived there. In order to provide jobs for the families of power engineers, the Jupiter plant, which produces electronic equipment, was opened. The history of Pripyat is often confused with the history of Chernobyl. It is important to understand that Chernobyl and Pripyat are 2 completely different cities. Pripyat is 2 kilometers from the nuclear power plant. Chernobyl is about 13 kilometers away. Pripyat NPP is called Chernobyl NPP because the station is located in the Chernobyl region. The station has nothing to do with the city itself. The history of Pripyat began as a satellite of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1970. The city of Chernobyl has a long history. The building of the nuclear power plant, approved as a project in 1967, could accommodate 3 different types of reactors: water-water VVR, graphite gas RK1000 and graphite water RBMK1000. It was decided to put the RBMK1000, which at that time had already been tested at several nuclear power plants in the Union. By 1986, there were 4 reactors in operation at the plant. The capacity of each of them was 1,000 megawatts. 2 more nuclear power units, reactors 5 and 6, were under construction at that time. They were stopped in construction after the Chernobyl disaster. Construction of the new power units, which were never launched, was carried out from 1981 to 1983, respectively. Few people know, but in addition to the 1986 disaster known to all, there was another relatively major accident at the Chernobyl NPP in Pripyat. In 1982, on September 9, the reactor was started up at Unit 1 of the CHNPP after a planned repair. Reactors consist of several channels where nuclear fuel is placed. Outwardly they look like big holes, where they put the fuel assemblies, bundles of tubes with uranium inside. In channel 62 to 64 the fuel assembly broke down and, as a result, the channel ruptured. The emergency protection did not work. For another 20 minutes the reactor power was very high, 700 megawatts. This had unfortunate consequences. Not only the first, but also the second reactor was damaged as a result of the accident. A radioactive mixture of steam and gas was released into the atmosphere. The areas close to the plant were contaminated. But since the Soviet media was very reluctant to publicize the accident, Pripyat, just like the rest of the Soviet Union, never learned about the accident. As we can see, there were already problems with the RBMK 1000 reactors. By the way, not only at CHNPP. Several accidents have also occurred at the Leningrad nuclear power plant, which uses the same reactors. Insufficiently well-designed and engineered reactors are one of the main reasons, which is said to be responsible for the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. Along with it, there is an opinion that the plant workers were to blame for the accident. What did Pripyat suffer from? How was it? Many people today know about what happened to the city of Pripyat from documentaries and films. The history of Pripyat is known to many by the personal stories of people who fled the city, but they learned about the disaster more than a day after the accident. What was happening at this time at the scene, at the heart of the plant, at Unit 4 of the nuclear power plant? Let's try to find out. The largest scale nuclear accident in Pripyat occurred at night from 25 to April 26, 1986. On April 25, the workers of the plant stopped Power Unit 4 for scheduled repairs. During the shutdown, it was planned to test a new system of emergency electricity supply, which was proposed by the Gidroprojekt Institute. To test it, the reactor capacity was reduced by half in advance. The emergency cooling system was switched off. The conditions of the experiment demanded it. The reactor power continued to decrease, at one point even losing control over it. Several times the power jumped from low to high. The control managed to get back into the hands of the plant workers. All this was just preparation for the experiment. At 1 hour 23 minutes and 4 seconds they began the test. CHNPP reactor 4 began to spontaneously increase its power. After 30 seconds, the operators gave an alarm. In this case, the absorbing rods must enter the reactor core and stop the fission of uranium atoms. As it turned out later, the emergency rods were improperly designed and they failed to stop the reactor. The reactor power grew rapidly, and after a couple of seconds the system was out of control. Several violent shocks occurred. At 1 hour 23 minutes and 47 seconds, i.e. 43 seconds after the test began, the number 4 reactor completely collapsed. As a result of the reactor explosion, about 30 fires broke out at the plant, including the roof of the turbine hall. All special response units were put on alert. At 5 a.m. on April 26, the fire was completely extinguished. After the fire, all equipment of reactor number 4 was shut down. The neighboring power unit number 3 was also put out of service. But the disaster in Pripyat was widening. At 8 p.m. the same day, a new fire broke out in the central hall of Unit 4, due to the accumulation of flammable substances in the rooms of the plant. It was not extinguished by the usual means, but instead a helicopter was sent in. Later, experts will say that by spraying chemicals and dumping sand, the helicopter pilots only exacerbated the situation and heated up the reactor even more. It took a week to extinguish all the fires. According to some reports, a month after the incidents, on May 23, a third fire broke out in Pripyat, which was extinguished by about 300 people for 8 hours. However, the fact of the fire remained classified by order of Gorbachev himself. Pripyat in 1986 became a fire-ravaged town, draped in smoke and radioactive emissions. Today, the abandoned town of Pripyat is a radioactive zone, in which it is not safe to stay for a long time. The catastrophe in Pripyat brought to the settlement many dangerous radioactive compounds. The total release of radioactive substances after the destruction of the reactor was about 14 by 1018 becquerels, a unit of measurement of radiation activity, which is about 380 million curies of radioactive substances. By comparison, it was 100 times more than the amount of radioactive material released in 1945 after the Americans dropped the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. From the territory of the plant, the wind carried isotopes of uranium and plutonium, cesium, strontium, and iodine. The Ukrainian lands were contaminated over 50,000 square kilometers. The releases reached 12 regions of the country. But there are also neighboring Belarus, Russia, and European countries. Radioactive rains after the disaster were recorded even in Germany and Ireland. About 95% of the radioactive substances are still in the reactor building. Yes, they have not been destroyed in 30 years. The reactor is covered by the sarcophagus and should not allow dangerous compounds to pass through, but world experts have long argued that the sarcophagus shell is falling apart and the plant badly needs additional protection. The Ukrainian leadership has been solving this issue for several years. I thank you for watching. Your support is very important to me. Your comments and thumbs up motivate me to release new videos on interesting topics. Subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the new videos.